West Virginia mountain melody. There's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free. Your West Virginia mountain melodies.
Welcome to another edition of Around and About the Clarksburg History Museum, and I'm your host, Martha Jett, and today I am very excited to welcome Bob Taylor as our guest today. Bob Taylor is a realtor in Lewis County, but he loves history, so what better place to talk history than our podcast today? And Bob, welcome, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Martha.
We're going to go down several history paths today, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the streetcar history, some Clarksburg memories, and just going to let Bob, you lead us down to whatever path we want to go on. But I thought first, Bob, I'd like to ask you, where were you born? And
I was born in Weston at the City Hospital on Main Street. Now it's, of course, the City Hospital becomes Stonewall Jackson Hospital in 1972. And the building no longer exists. And I have the door plate, which is a piece of painted glass with number 8 on it. That's the room my mother was in when I was born. And I have that at home.
How neat to have that.
So when they were tearing the house down, I spoke to the salvager, and he says, anything in there you want, help yourself. I said, really? So I went back, and there it was. Door number 8 was right there, and I got a ladder. And it's looks like it's about 4 inches by 4 inches, and somebody hand painted number 8 on it. And they had it attached to the wall with a light socket, and there was 2 of them like this. And that way the nurse stepped out the end of the hall, they could see the light was on door number 8. So I have that. My mother at that point was in the hospital for 4 or 5 days. Today it's a lot different. So on the way home from the hospital, we rode in, it wasn't an emergency car, it was a rescue car from the fire department. It was like, almost like a hearse, but it was, the fire department did the rescue, did the ambulance, did it all. So they picked us up. My mother's laying on a gurney, and my grandmother has me cradled in her arms, and she's right by the door. So we come from Weston, go down through Haleville. We're going north now till we get to turn off to Jackson's Mill. And at the railroad crossing by the Colonial Glass Factory, they bounced across, and my grandmother come out and scooting across the blacktop. But this little bundle of joy
fell out of the car with you?
Yes. And she's cradling this little bundle of joy, and she's the one who had road rash on both of her hips.
Oh my goodness. So you were a bouncing baby boy.
I was a bouncing baby boy. Yes, I was.
What were your parents' names?
My father's name was Robert Ray Taylor. My mother's name was Relda Lee Williams. And they were married, first ones to be married in Jacksonville Baptist Church, September the 8th, 1946. So I tell everybody, I said, my parents were married September the 8th, and I was born the 24th. Oh my, really? I said, oh yeah, only a year later.
What did your dad do for a living?
My dad went to school to university. He loved the outdoors. He could identify any leaf, any tree by the bark, by the stem. That's sassafras. That's what that is. And he was going to be a forest ranger, and he went 3.5 years, and he did various things. He was a paratrooper in World War II. Bronze Star, saved 5 men from a burning tank. Purple Heart, and he still, the day he died, he still has shrapnel in his leg from World War II. But he did many things. He probably the first job I remember was we were in Winchester, Kentucky, and he sold automatic milkers for De Laval. De Laval was a very big company, and if you had a dairy farm with 25 or 50 or 100 head of cattle, that was a lot of labor if you hand milked those. So that's when the automatic milkers come out, and you attach them, and then you just push the button, and the milk goes in a container, and then it goes in a larger container, and it ends up.
That saves so many manpower hours.
Yes. So he did that, and then come back to West Virginia. Somebody had called him and says, "Hey, the railroad is hiring," and he went to work for the railroad. Then there was a slowdown there, and he got laid off. Then he went in business for himself. Blue Star Potato Chip. Then in the early 50s, every 2 miles there was either a filling station or a little country store, and so the country store maybe sold gasoline, maybe had your groceries. It was on the counter. There was pickled pig's feet. There was Polish sausage. There was this. There was dill pickles and the potato chips and snacks and candy. So he had a route and the Blue Star Potato Chip. And I don't know where this is going, but he gambled a lot, played cards a lot for high stakes, and he could do that 2-3 days at a time, just sit right there and not get up. So then we lived with my grandparents. Then we come back to Clarksburg, lived on Lee Avenue, and I started school at Towers School, which is probably one of the older schools in Western Virginia at one time. So I started school there, lived up on 222 Lee Avenue, just across from WI High School. And we'd moved 29 times before I was 10 years old. Lived in Clarksburg, lived in Bridgeport, lived in an old schoolhouse in Bridgeport, lived on East Pike Street, well, I was back this way from the old Parkette back. I think there's a Stonewall Park or something right there. I think we lived one of those two-story houses there.
What do you remember about downtown Clarksburg? Some of
what
the
I
stores.
remember about downtown Clarksburg, I remember the arcade where J.C. Penney's was. You come off, I think this is Washington Street back here. You come down to Main and had the glass ceiling, and it was like awesome. Downtown Clarksburg, you had J.C. Penney's, you had all these stores. It was like an indoor mall then, and nobody heard the name mall, or a group of stores all together under one roof. That fast, of course, it was a shortcut to school as well. You come down and cut across and work your way over. And I can remember, I loved going to Sears Roebuck. I remember McCroy's had a lunch counter. You get a plate of lunch for $1.25. I thought, and that was a lot of money then. I loved to go into James and Law, that school smell of the oiled floors, of the crayons. And I was in there a couple months ago. I was an attorney's office for closing. I thought, I'll just walk through. Can I help you? I want to see your West Virginia selection. And so I looked around, and it's still there.
It brought back memories.
Oh, it did. Yes.
Did you ever go to Sanitary Hot Dog? About everyone I've talked to about Clarksburg, they fond memories of
Ritzy
Sanitary
Hot Dog.
Hot Dog.
I've been there.
Ritzy's is good too.
Been there.
Yeah.
The Ritzy lunch beside the Robinson Grand. I can remember Moore's Opera House. I remember the Robinson Grand. The Working Man's Store would go there. Clarksburg was loaded. Clarksburg, it took you an hour from Weston driving Route 19, and once you got here, Hagen, they made a hot dog. It was called a Frankfurter. It was an open-faced hot dog. They would butter the bread and then the hot dog, and then put relish on it. It was great. Those some of my good memories.
The food is what people mostly remember about Clarksburg.
The food.
Yeah, it was great memories.
It is.
And it was an event to come to town.
Well, it was. Lived in a rural setting, and to come to town, and your neck hurt just looking around and just trying to take it all in and see what it was.
And you dressed up.
Oh,
you dressed. Your mom dressed up,
just like you're going to church on Sunday.
Yeah, it was sort of a religious experience.
It was.
Well, let's segue into people coming into town. How would they come into town? Let's talk streetcars.
Well, streetcars, of course. Streetcars really got started probably in New York for mass transit. 1832, the streetcars were metal wheels on a metal track, and they were limited where they could go. They were pulled by horses. So to consider, they were a lot smaller. Maybe you get 6 or 8 or 9 people and 2 horses. And of course, somebody had to maintain the horses. And then with live animals, there's certain things that create a stench. It's unpleasant. And as busy as New York was, there's many, many, many avenues of transportation. Well, being in rural West Virginia, 81 years later, September 30th, 1916, the first streetcar arrived in Weston. Now, how do we get there? How do we get to 1916? Weston on the West Fork River, downriver from Clarksburg and Fairmont, the Monongahela River, the streets were not paved. 1915, 1916, the paved streets only went out a mile in each direction from west, a mile. Well, the U.S. mail come by stagecoach. We see that on television, but the U.S. mail come by stagecoach, and sometimes they could make it. Sometimes they'd be 2 hours late because they get caught. And then oil and gas was very favorable. You had Kennedy Station, Valley Chapel, which was a large compressing station. In fact, during World War II, they had armed guards all around it 24/7. You know, it was different living in wartime. You had evacuation procedures. You couldn't have your lights on after a certain time at night. If you heard a siren, you know what to do. So in bringing a lot of equipment into the oil and gas, they didn't have the big trucks. So you would have 50 or 60 teams of horses, and that's 120 animals. And each set, 2 or 4, had a handler. And they would set up a camp, and here's this big machine, big compressing machine. And once they went over and pulled a heavy and just made the ruts deeper in the road, and traffic was handicapped. And
I mean, even the horses would get bogged down.
They would be buried up to their waist.
They dig out the horses.
They couldn't move. And so streetcar, the train, the B&O Railroad come to West in 1879, and it was mostly hauling coal. Still presence of the railroad in southern Lewis County. That coal comes from Webster Springs in the Burnsville area, and it goes to Grafton, and it goes to Cumberland, Maryland, to points east. So, and twice a day, a train runs through Walkersville from Webster Springs, bring the coal, take it to Grafton, and then it goes to offshore, wherever it goes from there, overseas. And then with the advent of the train, which is west into Clarksburg, was pretty good. But in order to stop and start a train, you have to start it. You have to build up a steam pressure, and it's not good for short stops. It's good for long distance. Then they stop and get water, because as they produce steam, it takes the water out of the water compartment. So to stop from here to the next block, a train couldn't do it.
It wasn't feasible to do.
So Clarksburg really got started, the streetcar got started in this area near Reesville in Marion County, because you had a couple things. You had the coal mines, which they used to generate electricity, and you had the Mon River, so they built a power plant there. In order to use, and that was good for the mines, that was good for the coal company, and also it was good for the workers, because most people didn't have a car. In 1915 in Weston, there's 13 automobiles. And every automobile, I mean, it went to the doctor, it went to the attorney, it went to the land baron. And the first cars, you had to have a mechanic, because set in the back seat. So you go to the store to get your new dress, get your new hat, get your new hat pin. You drive 50 feet. Okay, hop out and fix it. Well, you go out and raise the hood, tap here, tap there. Okay, I will go. So you go another 200 feet and it stops again. So every time you went out in the car, you required, but you could only go so far. You dare not go off the blacktop road, because your car may be there for a week till somebody pulled it out. So it drifted on down to Fairmont, drifted into Clarksburg, and Clarksburg extended it 7 miles up to Mount Clair. So now we're up to 1910, and it's a couple years. So Weston had some glass factories, and they made small hand blown glass. And you've been to some of the restoration places. When they hand blown a glass, it was flat. They couldn't do a 20 by 20 or a large piece, because the technology wasn't there. They could blow into a glass mold, and when they get done, take it out, and there's your drinking glass, there's whatever. So, and that was good because of the natural gas, because of the coal, and because of the silica sand was so very readily available. Now, the transportation for the people, if you worked at the factory, which is probably on the outskirts of town, it wasn't in the main business district, you either walked or you caught a ride. And so now people are hungry for the streetcar. And so the contract was let out, 3 contracts, 5.5 miles. And they had the survey crew from what's the best route from Weston to Clarksburg. They had one survey crew here, one survey crew coming this way, and they got together and they kind of massaged their surveys, and they said, okay, we'll come along the river. It's pretty flat. There's not many hills. There's a hill in Jane Lou and one in Mount Clair, and they couldn't do more than a 3% grade.
How did a streetcar run on electric?
The streetcar was run on electric. Electric was coming this way, and the streetcars really did a lot for growing because the electric was generated at the plant at Reevesville. They would be an overhead wire, and then they would be the first streetcars in the big cities. They had the electric running through the rails. Well, on a rainy day, people get shocked.
Oh.
Or animal gets shocked and electrocute them.
Yeah.
So that's not safe. So they put the electric overhead. And as you can see on this one model on the porch, and I have some pictures here in my book, it would attach and it would run along.
Like a rod.
It would be a rod, and you could hear it connecting and generating electricity. So this would run. And it was very energy efficient. You could stop on a dime, you could start on a dime. And so now the roads there's two places crossing the West Fork, one just north of Turnertown, and the other off of Main Street in Weston, where the Stone Coal enters and I have pictures of those, pictures of the bridge and a streetcar on the bridge crossing, and they would come right up Main Street. So anyway, now the road's completed, and the track is completed from Clarksburg to Weston, and it was 70 cents to ride the streetcar either way. Streetcars operated 24 hours a day, starting at 5:30 a.m. Every half hour. They'd leave Clarksburg. Every hour they'd leave Weston, and there was 4 cars involved, and they would pass each other below Jane Lou. Later moved to McWhorter, and then they'd pass each other, and then soon they get to Clarksburg, they'd turn around and come back. Soon they get to Weston. Now, how did they turn around? Well, they really didn't turn around. The seats were movable, so you're riding this way. They were like on a hinge, a bench seat. And so when they would get to Clarksburg, the conductor, the motorman would take the seat and push them this way. Now the people were facing the other way. They moved the bench part of the back forward and backwards.
Well, that's pretty smart.
It is. And there was a metal rod to run along. There's a leather strap that you could put your wrist in. And it's called a strap hanger. And if it was busy, now the one that ran at Weston was car 250, and it could hold a maximum of 36 people. And it was 70 cents to ride from Weston to Clarksburg. There was 10 zones, and each zone was 7 cents. So in 1916, they built the traction building. Business was booming. Electricity was flowing. And the people said, gee whiz, this is great. There's electric on that car. If we get electric in our house, we don't need gas. So around the stops, there's 10 of them in Lewis County. Little communities kind of grew because, hey, I don't have to walk very far to ride to town. I don't have to walk very far to go to work. I don't have to walk very far.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to bring up, Bob, how important this was to outlying communities.
It was.
Like your farmer could hitch a ride on the streetcar and bring his produce into town.
Yeah, because
and sell
the roads weren't fit to go.
And I've read too, like before there were school buses, kids rode the streetcar.
They rode the streetcar
to school.
And in fact, somebody going to university would hop on a streetcar in Weston, go to Fairmont, get off, go to another one, and take you up and take you to Morgantown, or go to Fairmont State, or come to Clarksburg Business School. Yes. And then when a lot of fellows went to the service, they rode the streetcar to the induction center. Yeah.
And I also saw where they also hauled freight.
They hauled freight. They carried the U.S. mail.
Yes.
Very, very, very accurately on time and schedule. Every day it showed up at a certain time. And there's a fella, his name was Paul Harrison, and his dad was Oak Harrison. And Paul Harrison later become employee of the Citizens Bank. He would take his little dolly, sitting right there. And it was really neat, just like you see in the movies. People stood around, see who's getting off the streetcar. It was an attention getter. It drew a crowd. Oh, look at that. Is that a new doctor? Is that a lawyer? Is that a gambler? Who is that?
I read in 1902 Clarksburg paper. That's when the streetcar first came down the streets of Clarksburg. It drew such a crowd. People were lined up and down the streets.
Well, they were.
And they chased after it because they couldn't get enough of this horseless wonder.
Right. They've never seen it before.
Wouldn't that? I mean, here you are living with horse and buggy, and then you see this electrical car coming down the streets.
And we're coming off the Industrial Revolution. At one time, everything was made in the home. You made your shoes, you made your clothes, you took the feed sack and made a dress for your daughter. You did all these things. Now we've become metropolitan.
Yes. I mean, what a wonder. That would have been a wonder to have seen.
It was. And people would gather. And then in 1916, they built a traction building in Weston. And there they had a waiting room. They had a freight depot. And on the same streetcar you're riding, there was a wider door for freight. And somebody would load the freight on. That's somebody's steamer trunk that's been traveling. That's a U.S. mail. That's a crate of chickens. That's two peach trees from a nursery that you'd ordered out of a magazine.
I think, wouldn't that have been a wonderful experience?
Oh, my goodness. I loved it.
I wish I was around when it was there.
Yes.
To be a conductor on the streetcar, did you have to have any kind of special training or anything?
You as a conductor, you were taught to be very courteous and very helpful. No foul language. Tip your hat to the ladies. Always help the ladies off. Always help the medically infirm off. Make sure they had a seat. Nobody ever hassled anybody. Look, lady, get on the bus. There's nothing like that.
And these men were like a train conductor.
They were like a train conductor. The motormen, and early on, they were out in the elements. They were in the nose of, and they guided. Probably the fastest they go is 12 to 14 miles an hour. Took you an hour and a half to get to Clarksburg.
You would put the sides down in the wintertime, right? There were sides that came down.
Yes.
And then in the summer, they would put those up. So then it would hold more passengers because you could kind of get on the side of it.
Exactly. And they have regular stops. Like, okay, so you leave Weston, you buy your ticket, you buy your token. You can buy tickets. Or if you're one lady, her name was Lennell, Lennell Stutler. She worked at the library for 42 years. She lived in Jane Lou. She rode the streetcar 5 or 6 days a week and loved it and made the comments how courteous the drivers were. One evening she was coming home and they hit a cow. She called it a heifer. And she said, after seeing that heifer, I changed my whole attitude about eating hamburger. But she went on to say how courteous the the conductors were. And you're driving, in the flick of a match, the streetcar would stop. How far are you going? We're going to Jane Lou. Hop on.
So that's how they knew.
That's how they knew. Yep.
Oh,
or if you're walking down and it's not a regular stop, ring the bell. We're going to stop. Pay your 7 cents, pay your 14 cents, pay your 21 cents, whatever. And I've never read where anybody robbed a streetcar because there probably wasn't enough money. But
I do want to touch upon, if you allow me,
a moment
here to. I know reading. I love reading those old newspapers.
Oh, I do. Yes.
Almost every newspaper back 1906, the 1900, would be about some sort of an accident with a streetcar. There were a lot of accidents.
There was a lot of accidents because all of a sudden you're going through somebody's pasture field. There's wild animals running across, plus the domestic animals. And getting the right-of-ways off the farmers, some were champions, no charge, help yourself. I'll tell you what, if you're going to do that, get over out of the level spot and put it along the creek or along the stream. That way you don't mess up my pasture field. and they give Mr. Clay Maxwell $2,000. Of course, that's right beside Deerfield Country Club, and Grafton Cole later purchased that, but it just cut his field right in half. And that was the best route. And he said, well, it'll be $2,000. And some, they had to pay for the right of way. Some they didn't. Some people were champions because now if I have extra tomatoes or extra potatoes, I can take them down and sell them now.
Yeah.
And it really was a godsend to a small community like Weston. And Weston was a good trading area because there's a lot of agriculture. Lost Creek, for example, if you read on the sign the state puts out about the history of Lost Creek, they ship more cattle out of Lost Creek than any place in the eastern United States at one time.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
If you don't mind here,
go ahead.
I wanted to read this little thing
Okay, sure.
about an accident with a streetcar here in Clarksburg. I mean, this was just like a typical story you'd see almost every newspaper. It was from 1905, and it says, Oda Rollins had a narrow escape from instant death yesterday evening. The accident happened on Pike Street near 3rd. Mr. Rollins tried to board a westbound streetcar while it was in motion, but his movements were hampered by his long, heavy overcoat. As the car gathered headway, he was forced to run alongside for some reason or another. He was unable to release his hold. Treading on the skirt of the overcoat, he was thrown to the brick paving, and still clinging to the car, he was dragged a distance of 50 feet. Fortunately, the only injury suffered was the scraping of the flesh from his chin and limbs. He was able to continue on his way home unassisted. I mean, can you imagine?
Getting your coat and you're going...
And you're being dragged by the streetcar, and you just continue on home.
Yeah, exactly.
But there were a lot of stories.
There was
like
a lot of, and of course the Weston Democrat. There was two papers, the Weston Democrat and the Weston Independent, and it was almost, as they were getting started, it was almost like watching a serial on television. Okay, this happened last week. Then there was a dentist, George Keener, who built, and he was an entrepreneur as well. And he petitioned the county commission now, to extend the railway south to Jacksonville, which is up around Stonewall Jackson Lake. And they granted it, and he just didn't do anything. So the same with the Mon Traction. And of course, the Monongahela Traction Valley Corporation later became what we know today as Mon Power First Energy.
Oh, okay.
Okay. In Weston, the power station was along the West Fork River, and it was also the water treatment plant, and it was the only place in town you could buy ice. So they were in big chunks. So, and I can remember as a kid, you go on a picnic and stop, and they were open on Saturday and Sunday. You buy a chunk of ice for 50 cents or 75 cents. And they would run it through a crusher, and you would put it in your Coca-Cola cooler or whatever. And but that's the only place that had ice.
And that was a big deal back then.
That was a big deal. Yes, it was.
Let me ask a question on these streetcars. I'm curious about this. So in the wintertime, like, did they have someone cleaning off the tracks, or did they just not run?
Oh, they run, and they had heat in them in the wintertime.
Oh, they did?
They had heat in them.
Would they have like a stove?
They had some kind of electric heat, because electric burners, but they had heat. Of course, you bundled up, but it took the chill out of the air being on a streetcar.
What if your electric was off, though?
Well,
they just stopped wherever they were? What did they do with the people?
Well, that happened one time. And somebody went to the neighbor, and they said, "We'll send out another streetcar and take them on, or we'll get them out of there." And that's happened a time or two. And a tree falls across the line, like today, you're out of power. One time there in Shady Brook, which is north of Weston, they had a rock slide, and the streetcar from Clarksburg would bring them up, and the people would get out and walk around it. And then there'd be another car come from Weston, taking one into Weston.
And I bet also there were a lot of derailments, probably.
There was.
A lot of accidents like that.
The customer relations with the streetcar was phenomenal. Bill Adler, a local historian, had gone through the older Democrats and compiled several different things. This happened on this date, this happened on this date, and he did a lot on the streetcars. And he was telling that, of course, streetcars went up and down Main Street. They ring the bell, and of course, being on that metal on the track, they make a lot, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. His mother got gravely ill, and her dad was a doctor. That would have been his grandfather. And she was very sensitive to the noise. And he called the traction company or wrote him a letter and said, could you hold the noise down for a couple of days? And they stopped 4 blocks from the trains or the streetcar station, not to enter, so she could have peace. And the people would walk from there. So that's on Main Street, right beside near the Citizen Bank, like 3 blocks down, so it wouldn't disturb her.
Could you imagine them doing something like that today?
And then also, his mother, diagonally across the street, there was a Pure Food Market, which run by Mr. Russell Cody. His son later went on to go to West Point. But anyway, she paid her fare to ride, and said, told the motorman, says, I need to go over to Pure Food and get some groceries. Pick me up out front. So she goes ahead, and when she gets done, the streetcar's waiting for her in front.
They were accommodating.
Oh, they were very accommodating,
But like this story where the guy was dragged by the streetcar, how come the conductor couldn't stop the streetcar?
They can stop on a dime.
But they didn't stop for this guy who was being dragged.
You know,
maybe they didn't know he was being dragged.
Maybe not.
I just wondered, could they stop them when they?
Oh, they can stop on a dime. I mean, there's
Okay.
no. I mean, it's like the electric cars today. I mean, they can stop right now. With a train, it takes a mile for a freight train to stop. But I mean, they can stop pretty quick.
Wow.
And to help them get traction, later on, they put like containers of sand over each wheel, and that would help them get traction or help them slow down. So it increased the resistance from steel and steel.
What would a streetcar conductor, like, what would his wage, would he be making pretty good money for that time period back then?
Some of the laborers were making 85 cents a day. I think a street conductor made either $1.25 or $1.35 a day.
And that was pretty good, wasn't it?
Well, that was great. Yeah, 40-hour week, you make $52.
I bet some of these men were conductors the whole lifetime of.
They were. One lady, Mrs. Hazel Tharp, she rode the first streetcar to Clarksburg. Then September 30th, 1947, she rode the last streetcar.
Oh, how neat.
How about that? Yeah.
How neat.
And with the glass factory in Weston, of course, Weston is noted at one time the hand-blowing glass capital of the world, and they're on the outlying parts of town. Well, the streetcar only went to Main Street, halfway up Main Street, like to the 200 block. So it come up Main Street like 7 blocks up Main Street. Now, some of the other areas, maybe like Fairmont, Clarksburg, they went over to Glen Elk. They went by Hazel Atlas Glass. They went by Anchor Hocking. So you got to ride the bus or a streetcar. And the glass factory, a lot of people connected would come from outlying area on the streetcar, say Jane Lou, and they worked in West of the glass factory. Well, they're tickled to death to only walk a mile rather than, so the streetcar did so much for the communities and for transportation. Now, a lot of the big cities are reverting back to the streetcars. New Orleans, the longest running streetcars in the country. Now they become, because the streets in New Orleans are narrow, they run off the tracks in the pavement. You're taking a guided tour of New Orleans. This is the French Quarter. This is Bourbon Street. This is Cafe du Monde. This is the Mississippi River. This is the riverboat. This is a statue of Lafayette. This is a statue of Joan of Arc. This is a horse this person rode. Yeah.
And what a clean energy source.
Oh, it is. It is.
It would really fit into
There's no smoke. There's no smokestack.
But what was the demise of the streetcar or in this area?
Well,
better roads.
The demise of the streetcar. General Motors contacted the big newspapers. They wanted to sell cars, and the cars were competing against the cars, and they want them to plagiarize how unsafe it was to ride a streetcar. Capitalize, front page story: streetcar runs off track, 2 people are injured. Streetcar hits cow. Somebody has a broken leg.
So they did a smear campaign.
They did a smear campaign. They did. Now, the demise. So at one time, the electric company was making $1.6 million a year just off the electric for the streetcars. And you can do a bar graph. It started off like, climbing and escalating, and great sales are good. We're selling a lot of electric to the streetcars because simultaneously, not only in Clarksburg, Parkersburg, Wheeling, Martinsburg, Charleston, all over the state, the streetcars would go out 2 miles or go out 3 miles, bring people to town. You want to come to a ball game? I have a picture like you have. Today's ball game special, and
they had special streetcars.
They had special streetcars
to the fair, or to ball game.
Take you out, and right there in Jordanville, which is one of the stops, it went right by the fairground, and they would do harness racing there. The Bennett family, which is Hunter Bennett's family, his great uncle was the treasurer of the state of Virginia during the Civil War, and they do a reenactment because they sent $25,000 in gold to pay the workers for working on the hospital, the asylum. It was Western State Hospital, now it's Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, and there was a bank robbery there, and if the South had won the war, the Bennett family would own the state of West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a big oval racetrack, had a barn with 100 horses. Streetcar went right by there,
and you could kind of rent a streetcar if your church congregation was having a picnic. You could have a special car.
That's the big thing with the bigger cities. They cater to weddings. Take the whole wedding party out to the Grove for pictures. You have a tent set up, and it's the ambiance of the streetcar, the nostalgic, and this is rather than taking 6 cars, you take 2 streetcars, you take 3 streetcars. And that's your wedding party right there.
But in this area, I think roads that were better.
Roads got better.
More and more automobiles then on the roads.
Roads got better. Then city lines, bus lines. Bought the right of way, and so then during World War II, streetcars were very fashionable because you had to have a gas stamp to buy gas. The only one who could buy gas was a doctor or somebody that was had a lot of influence. Nobody selling any cars because that was all going to the war effort. So you hopped the streetcar, rode to town. You come home. You went to the theater. You paid a nickel to the theater. You paid 15 cents to ride the streetcar. I mean, you could do a lot.
So the war kind of was the buffer, but before the end of the streetcars,
right.
That delayed it a little bit.
When the war is over. Okay, all these soldiers are coming home. They're buying cars. Cars now are yellow and green and turquoise and white. And now these soldiers are gonna have a place to live, and we're building homes. I mean, it was great in the as a baby boomer, people lived. They were happy. Chicken in every basket, two cars in every garage. And more people were driving. The roads were better. Eisenhower brings home the interstate system from World War II. That starts. Of course, it took a little while for it to catch up in West Virginia in the 1970s, but it's here. And then, revenue started falling off. It's just economics for the street.
And probably too, Bob, like here you had these tracks. Now they're in the way of us building a better road.
They
want them out of our way.
And that was part of the agreement. When it ceased, the tracks had to come out and put it back.
So what was the end of the streetcars in this area? What year?
1947.
So they
okay.
Pull up tracks.
Here's a streetcar. They have no use for it. I've seen pictures where there's a streetcar graveyard. There's hundreds of them sitting off the side. Then all of a sudden, these museums sprang up. There's probably 25 museums across the country. And now they're looking for things to fill their museum. Here's one, and this is the way we found it. Here's one that's completely refurbished. Here's one that's this. Here's one that's that. Now it becomes a tourist attraction because they were a little kid and wrote it. And it's just like the baby boomers now are in a position, they're retired. They're in their mid to late 70s. They can still travel. They can still go. So they want to see something that touched their life, the nostalgic of it.
And didn't some of these streetcars, they turned them into like restaurants?
Well, they have. Down exit 133, Fairmont, that looks like the diner there. So they've done a lot of things. Some places I've seen where it becomes the honeymoon suite.
But just like so many things that we've experienced in our lifetime, overnight that disappeared.
It just dried up, just like a snowball on a sidewalk. It just disappeared.
I hope that it comes back one day.
Well,
I don't know that it ever will here.
Old ways are good ways, but progress sometimes doesn't see that. And I'm very nostalgic about things like that of a bygone era. It's like antiques. My children had no interest in antiques.
Mm-hmm. We hear that every day here at the History Museum. You know, my daughter's not interested in this big cabinet I have.
Oh, I mean, you know, you walk in this house.
Times change.
And here's a handmade cherry corner cabinet. It's worth $8,000. No, that's I don't like it. You know,
yeah,
it's 7 feet tall. It's 150 years old. But yeah, times have changed. It's all right here. It's in the thumbs. It's instant gratification. It's drive-through. It's delivery. It's frozen. It's microwave.
Is there a lot available on the history of streetcars? Can you recommend like books or?
There's a lot of books.
Okay.
If you go online and put streetcars, there's so many museums. You can become a member. You get an email. We're doing this. We're doing that. I've talked to the director at the Pennsylvania Museum, and I asked him about 250. And it's here. It's not for viewing. It's not ready for viewing. And I have pictures of it being hauled in on a tractor trailer. I have pictures of it being there, taking it apart. I have pictures, but you can go online and you can write a book about what the streetcars are.
Would you let us know when that is available to see? I'd be interested in knowing when that streetcar is available.
Oh, I will. Oh, yeah, I will.
Yeah, let us know.
I want to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see.
I want to be there. Now, this one right here, this is number 250. Okay,
and we'll put a picture up on the podcast of that.
And that's the one.
Beautiful.
That's the one that, and then of course I have a lot of pictures. Okay, there's.
Did you ever get to interview anyone that worked as a conductor or?
I talked to a fella by the name of Jim Bandy. He grew up in Turnertown, and his house was right beside the stop. And he's 91 years old, and he rode the streetcar. That's all he had. He didn't have a car. Come to town, go to a dance after school. You know, you miss the bus, you ride the streetcar home. And I've talked to him because he lived right on the line. Now, the lady that worked at the library, I didn't talk to her, but I read someone else's commentary where she shared that she'd worked 42 years and she worked at Lewis Bennett Library. She was a librarian, typical Icon member, you know, her hair pulled back, the bun. She had a gray sweater on. I mean, she's very conservative, but she was there for 42 years at the.
If someone would have stories like maybe their relatives were a conductor on a streetcar or something, could they contact you?
Oh, I'd love to.
How would they reach you?
Just Bob Taylor. My phone number 304-838-4545.
Okay. And you have an email too.
Bob Taylor 663@yahoo.com.
And we'll put that on the podcast too.
Okay.
I think that would be interesting.
I would go interview and take a picture.
Wrapping up before we have to wrap up here, I want to ask you one other part of your life.
Okay, that's fine.
You worked for Garden Fresh.
I worked for Garden.
Near and dear to the Harrison County area.
Well, John Caputo was a wonderful person. And in 1950, he got married. Speaking of streetcars, he borrowed $200 from his wife. And out here on the other side of Menards, there was an abandoned streetcar right across the street where Tolly Electric or West Virginia Electric or Mountain State Electric, whatever it is. He bought a load of potatoes and turned that 200 into 500, then turned that 500 into something else.
And he operated out of this old abandoned streetcar?
He did, like an open air fruit market.
What a coincidence. Okay.
I mean, they're everywhere. But anyway, that's how he got his start. And Wilson Baking here in Clarksburg, hooked up with them. We'll make your bread. And after a few years, he built number 2 over at Edge on the other side of Clarksburg, but Gore, Edgewood. That's number 2 Garden Fresh.
Well, read on this. This is 1973. Look at all the Garden Fresh stores that were in the area.
That's it. Number 3, number 4, Buchanan Pike, number 4, number 5, Buchanan, Mannington, Grafton, Elkins, Salem, Harrisville. That's it.
Yeah. It was a big change.
Oh, it was.
And I didn't know it started in Clarksburg.
It started in Clarksburg. They started in Clarksburg, and number 1, and of course they built number 3 Weston in April 1955, and their headquarters over in Greenlawn Edition. Greenlawn Edition. If you're at Victory High School, and you go towards Parkersburg, you go about half a mile. And of course, Route 50 took it out. That was their warehouse, Greenlawn Edition.
How long did you work for Garden Fresh?
17 years.
And you were manager? What stores did you work in?
I worked at Weston. And then when they opened up, when they opened up the Nutter Fort store, I helped with the grand opening there. I went to Salem, helped with the grand opening there. I went to Harrisville, helped with the grand opening there. Fairmont, I went there when they opened that one up. I went to grand opening there. And
I found an ad for the Garden Fresh in Nutter Fort grand opening.
Okay.
And the slogan was, "We serve you better because we care more. With us, it's the customer who counts." And they also advertised they offered bag boys and carryout boys.
Oh, we did.
Boy, those are things of the past, aren't they?
And they give me some freedom. And of course, I put an ad in the yearbook, the friendly store with the personal touch.
Now, I have to ask you, on WBOY, was the name of the thing that you were in, was it called WBOY Teenage Hit Parade?
No, it's called Fairmont Junior Auction.
Okay, that's what it was called. Okay, because I found an article about this teenage hit parade in 1958. They bring kids in and they judge. It's sort of like American Bandstand thing. I think that's what it was.
No, it was on Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. Pete Lyman, general manager. It was Uncle Pete. Uncle Pete was the auctioneer. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Fairmont Junior Auction.
Okay.
And today we have these prizes, and you bid on them. And whoever has the most points wins the prize. Okay, let's get started. Bring up a baseball bat, 200, 300. Okay. And it's going, here's an ant farm. Well, nobody bid on it. I got it for like maybe 150. So, okay, I see what's going on here now. Okay, I got it. So, and then 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, we have a big red bicycle. 26-inch bicycle. Great. So I really hustled, huffed and puffed and rounded them up and tried to clean them best way I could. And some people cleaned them, some people didn't. But anyway, I brought home a bicycle.
Now, when was this program on? What year was that?
I was born in 47. So 58, 59, I was 10 or 12 years old, maybe 59. Yeah, something like that.
And was it every Saturday?
Every Saturday.
Morning?
Every Saturday.
Saturday morning or something? How neat.
Oh, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I've never heard of that program.
Yep, Fairmont Junior Auction.
And you got it from collecting?
Okay, Fairmont was the named dairy in the air. Like Metagold Dairies used to be big here. And when I worked for Garden Fresh, they made Garden Fresh milk. So, I mean, it was the same milk. It's just like Walmart. You get the Equate brand and you get the name brand. And, you know, a gallon of milk and then was 99 cents. Everybody just, you know, just every day, 400 or 500 gallon of milk went out the door. And then with Fairmont Milk, Fairmont Dairy, come out of Fairmont. And there's a bus driver. I mean, the driver was Gus Augustino. Of course, everybody called him Gus. Very friendly, very nice. He'd bring the milk in, put it in the cooler, take the old out if there's any. And the like I say, the milk cartons, every different item had a different point value to it. And you add up your points. In this garbage bag, I've got 800. I've got 1,500 here. You know, 10 or 15 garbage bags full of milk. Well, they wasn't the whole carton. I just cut the top off so they could see. And this was a cardboard with the wax on it. If you're a coffee drinker and you pour it in the wrong cup, all of a sudden all that wax melts. You've seen that before, probably. Oh, that's a wax cup. Can't use it. And then the styrofoam comes out, and then the other. It had the wax cardboard, and of course, it was always a mess. You set them down too hard. You know, the lid it comes apart at the staple, or this happens, or it gets broken. Of course, a lot of it was glass. The smaller ones, chocolate milk, and the small ones were glass, but they had a cap that went over like that, and you were able to. That had a point value. Half and half, cottage cheese, ice cream.
Anything. So you would collect these points.
I would collect the points.
Okay.
And keep them in the basement. And then when it's time to go, I'd get my grandfather, someone to take me down, and trunk load, back seat. There's two of us. The rest of the car is full of garbage bags full of Fairmont Dairy products. I mean, he was okay. I had two brothers. I was the oldest, so there was so much love. Little Bobby, oh, hold on to little Bobby. This is for little Bobby, and you know this. There was probably 10 million pictures of me and my other brother come. There's only 1 million. My third brother come. There's no picture, but it's still that way. When you have the firstborn gets all the pictures, then well, we already got pictures. You know, by the Christmas tree, by the bicycle, on the front porch, playing in the snow. You know, his first diaper. They're someplace in the house, but yeah, that was really neat. Fairmont Junior Auction, WBOY-TV. That was really neat, really neat.
I remember Pete Lyman as Uncle Pete.
Uncle Pete, yep. Yes, ma'am.
Very personable person.
Very personable, very friendly, good at what he did. He had the skill sets. He had the voice was very pleasing to the ear. It wasn't, who is that guy? But it all flowed very, very well.
Were you scared to be on TV?
The first time I was, and the second time, I said, I'm going to win that bicycle. You know, I don't know how many it takes, but if it takes everything I got, I want to win that bicycle. And I was really determined to win that bicycle. I did. So
that's a pretty neat story. I've never heard of that show. Well, you have some wonderful memories.
I do. It's wonderful.
You know, I hate to wrap this up, but my goodness, my clock on the wall is telling me we're going to have to go. I've loved talking to you, Bob. This has been a lot of fun. Will you come back again sometime?
Oh, I'll come back.
Love for you too. Love for you too. And I invite everyone else to come in here. We do have a little display about streetcars here in our museum.
Very nice.
So come in and visit. We're on Main Street in Clarksburg. And I hope you'll come back.
I will. I certainly will.
And I'll close in saying, till next time, remember to make each day count. You are making history today.
In the silence of your wildwood, to the rhythm played by every mountain stream, it becomes a lullaby every time that I come home to West Virginia in my dreams. West Virginia mountain melodies, there's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melodies. I feel secure in the arms of your green valley. There's a peace you've given me that's yours alone. Take me in like a child to the gentle of your wild West Virginia. I'm coming home. West Virginia mountain melodies. There's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melody. West Virginia mountain melody. There's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melody.